Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night. Tomorrow's a fast day. We're going to do the dinam of Purim, practical dinam. Could talk Purim there's a lot to learn on Purim. We're going to do the practical laws of Purim, and then we're going to discuss Chassidic insights to Purim instead of Tanya. Okay, tonight is Wednesday night. Tomorrow's the fast day of Tainus Esther. It's not a very serious fast. It's more lenient than all the other fasts that the Chachamim instituted, halachically. Nevertheless, a healthy person has to fast. So here in LA, the time for the fast begins at 5:51 a.m. If somebody wants planning to get up to eat early in the morning, they really have to have in mind before they go to sleep that they're planning to get up and eat. Because otherwise, halachically, as soon as you go to sleep and you fall asleep, then the fast begins for you. So anyway, whether you're planning to get up or not, it's a good idea just to have in mind that in case you get up, you're going to be able to eat in case you do get up during the night. Okay, so again, if people are not feeling well, pregnant, nursing women, they don't have to fast. Tomorrow's davening is regular Thursday morning davening. There's slichas, there's a long Avinu Malkeinu, there's Torah reading, but that you follow the siddur, you don't have to get into all those dinim at the present. Tomorrow afternoon, before mincha, the custom is to give a half a shekel. In fact, the custom is to give 3 half shekels. Now, in America, it's the half of the currency of that particular country. So we have in America, it's $1, and we have a half a dollar. Now, half a dollar, we have a coin called the half a dollar, because you can't give 2 quarters. Okay, you have to give half a dollar piece. If you go to the shows, they all have half a dollars. Now, the custom is to give 3 half dollars. So let's say you have a box or a thing with. If one doesn't fast the week, yes, you do say Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu has nothing to do with the fasting. It has to do with the fasting. And you say Slichas also. Okay, so now you put in $1.50, you take out 3 half dollars, and you put it back in, and that's the giving of Machzis Shekel. Now, according to many opinions, the age of obligation of Machzis Shekel is 20. Some people say Bar Mitzvah. Our custom is, many people have a custom to give even for younger kids. And the women, we also give for them. So if somebody has a wife and a few kids, and they're little, so the husband will give for himself, for the wife, for the little kids. Kids get older, they give it for themselves. You don't have to continue giving. But in fact, even if a woman is pregnant, the custom is to give for a pregnant woman also Machzis Shekel for the fetus. In fact, they say it's interesting. The commentators in Shulchan Aruch say that it says in the Chumash, "Kol ha'oved alap kudim," meaning whoever passes through. But over is the same words as ubar. So they call uber even an uber. That custom is that we give Machzis Shekel for everybody. Even once somebody gives the wife and children, then halachically you cannot stop giving. You have to give every year. You don't necessarily have to give, even though our custom is to give. But once you start giving, then you have to continue giving the half a shekel. Okay, that's as far as mincha. Tomorrow goes mincha. There's Torah reading also, and Anenu, and Avinu Malkeinu, and no, I'm sorry. There's no Tachlin Avinu Malkeinu tomorrow because it's Erev Purim. So Erev Purim, there's no. If Purim would be on a Sunday and we fast Thursday, then at Mincha we would say Tachlin and Avinu Malkeinu. But tomorrow there's no Avinu, to Mincha, there's no Tachlin, there's no Avinu Malkeinu. Okay, let's talk about the night of Purim. And number one, in Halacha, it's brought down that ideally people should wear Shabbos clothing on Purim. It's a big Yom Tiv. In fact, according to Chassidus, we'll discuss it. We get there. It's even a greater Yom Tiv than the 3 holidays of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Especially according to Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's a very, very big holiday. It says when Mashiach comes, all the holidays will become nullified. Not, God forbid, we won't keep them. It means that compared to the revelation of Mashiach, it's not going to be felt any Kedusha. But Purim is so great that even when Mashiach comes, we can still feel the Kedusha of Purim, as we will discuss hopefully later tonight, the uniqueness of the holiday of Purim. So ideally, Purim, people should wear big day Shabbos clothing. People get dressed up, all that stuff. But generally speaking, the attire for Purim should be big day Shabbos. In all the tefillahs, starting from Ma'ariv tomorrow night, we say Ad Ala Nisim. If somebody left out Ala Nisim, they do not repeat the Shemona Esrei. So if they finish that bracha, they said Baruch Atah Hashem, Hatoiv Shimcha. They said Baruch Atah Hashem. The din is you do not repeat the Shemona Esrei. You continue the Shemona Esrei and you're fine. Same thing in benching. If you forget Ala Nisim, you leave it. You don't have to repeat the benching, except when you say Harachman Hu Yizaken. If you look in the city, it'll tell you exactly what to do. Then you say Harachman Hu Yasalon Nisim Kresha Asalav Yisenu. It says in the city exactly what to do, and then you say Ala Nisim at the end of benching. But technically, if you forgot Ala Nisim in the davening or in the benching, you do not repeat the Shemona Esrei. Now let's talk about the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah. Okay, every man and woman over bar bas mitzvah, I have to have a rabbinic obligation to listen to the Megillah. The obligation also is for kids, for educational purposes, chinuch. They have to come listen to the Megillah reading. It says in halacha, if you bring babies, they're going to scream and yell, they don't know what they're doing, and they disturb other people from reading the Megillah, then they shouldn't be brought to shul because they're going to be disturbing those that are obligated in listening to the Megillah. So after Ma'ariv, tomorrow night, Wednesday night, the night of Purim, we say 3 brachas. The Chazan says 3 brachas, the Balkari says 3 brachas, and they read the Megillah. Now the din is as follows. When the Chazan says the 3 brachas, everybody has to stand. When he finishes the 3 brachas, everybody could sit, except the reader who's reading in a public place has to stand out of respect to the community. So the listeners, though, are allowed to sit, except when the 3 brachas are made, then they should be standing. Okay? And you answer Amen to the 3 brachas. You do not say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo. You just answer Amen, and you have in mind you're going to be fulfilling the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah. Now, when the Chazan, I'm going to the Chazan, it's really the Balkari, reads the Megillah, you have to hear every single word. If you miss one word, you are not fulfilling the obligation. You have to hear it again. So you have to make sure you're in a place where you can hear the Megillah. Many shuls have different readings later on and different times that everybody, even though you can't hear it the first time, there's other times you can go hear the Megillah, or come originally to begin with at a later time when it's much quieter in the shul that you can hear the Megillah. Now, what happens if a person is listening to the Megillah and for whatever reason is they missed a word or a few words? So the din is you read the word in the printed text, but you have to read that word that you missed and continue reading until you catch up to the reader, because the Megillah must be read in sequence. If you missed a word and you're going to be reading that word, and meanwhile the readers are a few words later, then you're not reading it in sequence. So if you miss a word, you quickly say that word, and if in the printed text you read quickly to catch up to where the Balkara is, and then you stop and you continue listening to the person reading the Megillah. If you have a printed text, you should not read the Megillah together with the reader. But if you miss the word, then you say the word and the next few words to catch up to the reader, and then you stop and you continue listening to the Megillah. That's the mitzvah of reading Megillah. You have to hear every single word. After the Megillah, there's a bracha that Balkari says, and then we finish davening, but that's not relevant to this class. Now, what happens if somebody already heard the Megillah and they're reading it for women only? So the din is the women should make their own bracha. According to most opinions, each woman should make their own bracha. Now, what is the bracha they say? Now, the men say the bracha al mikra Megillah. I'm reading the Megillah. But the poskim write that women are not obligated in reading. It's a very fine difference. But the bottom line is men are obligated to read the Megillah and women are obligated to listen to the Megillah. It's really the same thing. When you listen, it's like you read it, but there's still a difference. So the men say the bracha al mikra Megillah, to read the Megillah. Women, if you're reading it for the women and the guy already heard it, the Megillah, so the women make the first bracha, Baruch Hashem asher kitshanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu lishmoa Megillah, to hear Megillah. Then they say the other two brachas, sha'asanisim and shechianu. Okay? So again, men make the bracha. Ideally, if women are fasting, you have to fast. You're not allowed to eat until after the Megillah reading. So a person who's fasting is not allowed to break the fast until after listening to the Megillah. So that's the reading of the Megillah at night. You have to have in mind to listen to every single word. You hear every single word, and then you fulfill your obligation. You miss the word, you say the word, catch up to where the person is reading, and then you did the mitzvah of reading of the Megillah. Now, after Megillah reading, it says when you come home, many shuls have parties in the shul, so that takes care of that. But many opinions say that when you come home from listening to the Megillah, reading the Megillah, you should have a festive meal, not the meal of Purim, because all the mitzvahs of the day, I'm going to emphasize this soon, the mishleach mones, the two edibles to one person, matanos avyenin, the gifts to the poor people. The Suda of Purim must be done during the day. You cannot give shalach manas at night. You could, but you're not going to be fulfilling your obligation. So you have to do the mitzvahs only during the day. Nevertheless, it says at night you should come home and there should be a festive atmosphere in the house. Some people like candles, bracha, of course, they light a candle just to make it a festive time. Okay, let's get into Purim morning. Okay, so the Megillah we basically covered. Now, you can hear the Megillah preferred from sunrise until sundown, which, again, in LA, I believe it's 7:05, which is sunrise, and 7 p.m. is sundown. So it's a 12-hour day, basically. You should hear the Megillah after sunrise and any time during the day until sundown. People that have to go to work and they need to leave early, they can listen to it from dawn, which is 72 minutes before sunrise. So they can hear the Megillah 72 minutes before 7:05. So they can read it, technically before 6 o'clock. But again, preferred is after sundown. After sunrise. Now, the next day, by the way, it is brought down in halacha, it's preferable not to eat until you hear the Megillah. You could drink, but you can't eat a meal. You can make a little snack, but ideally you shouldn't eat until after you hear the Megillah in the morning, because it's a special mitzvah. You don't eat. Like people don't eat before shofar, people don't eat before lulav and esrig. It's just a custom that to show the importance of the mitzvah. Okay, during the day, again, we have the davening adding alanissim. That's the only difference. No tachnun alanissim. We have Torah reading again of the Parsha of Amalek. If somebody didn't hear Parsha Zachar, they can listen to the Torah reading Purim in the morning. Have in mind their yotza to fulfill their obligation of Parsha Zachar, and that's also fine. After Torah reading, we read the Megillah. Okay, I just want to mention one more thing about the reading of the Megillah. You cannot fulfill the obligation of the Megillah, not by night, not by day, not through a microphone, not through a telephone, not through a Zoom. And in fact, the poskim discuss that if somebody is wearing a hearing aid, ideally they should take out the hearing aid and stand close to the balkore to be able to hear the Megillah straight from the reader's mouth. A telephone, microphone, Zoom is also mechanically reproduced voice. It's not the original voice of the person. So therefore, you're not yetz of the Megillah if you hear it through the telephone and microphone. Now, if let's say you're in a show where they're using a microphone, but they shouldn't, but you're next to the balkari that you hear his voice directly from him, you can fulfill your obligation. But if you can't, you're actually not yetz at all the mitzvah. And they write the same thing with a hearing aid is the same concept. It's a mechanically reproduced voice that you're hearing. So ideally, both at night and during the day, you should not be having hearing aids. If somebody, Poskim, I'll tell you the example. Poskim, right, what should they do? The guy should read the Megillah himself, but not everybody's able to do that. So people should try to take out the hearing aid. If they're not able to take out the hearing aid, they can hear it and they can fulfill the obligation with the Eved, but not through a microphone or Zoom or anything like that. Now, the day mitzvah of listening to the Megillah. Now, we make again 3 brachas during the day, which is very interesting. The Alter Rebbe says we don't make a shechionu during the day. The Tzemach Tzedek says we do, and we do follow the Tzemach Tzedek's opinion that we say shechionu again at the Megillah reading during the day, in the morning or afternoon, whenever it is. Now, again, when the guy's reading the Megillah, it says the 3 brachas. You have to stand for the brachas, and then you can sit for the reading of the Megillah. When the Chazan says the bracha shechionu, you should have in mind, women, if they're fasting, need to fast until after Megillah reading. That's what I said, yes. When you hear the shechionu, you have to have in mind, not only does it go on the reading of the Megillah, it also goes on the mitzvahs of Mishloach Manos, Matanos Lavyenim, and Sudas Purim, which are 3 mitzvahs that besides the Megillah reading that every Jew has to do on the day of Purim. Now, to discuss a little bit the mitzvahs of Mishloach Manos, Matanos Lavyenim, and those types of things, which are very, very important. According to Halacha, we learn now from the Megillah, it says, Mishloach Manos ish l'reyehu. You should send gifts, each man to his friend. So from there, the Gemara learns out that the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos is 2 edibles to 1 person. They have to be ready to eat. They cannot be raw. They have to be 2 edibles. This notion and concept that they have to be 2 different brachas is absolutely incorrect. It could be 2 mezenis, 2 ha'etz, 2 shahakos, it doesn't matter. Many people will give a food and a drink. Now, according to many opinions, Mishloach Manos should be like a prominent food. I was mentioning tonight, you can't give 1 peanut and 1 raisin, even though they're 2 different things. But 1 raisin and 1 peanut is not really any of prominence to give somebody as a gift. So you wouldn't, according to many, many opinions, you wouldn't fulfill your obligation by doing that. It should be at least a kazayas, at least an ounce. It should be something, proper. So you have to give 2 edibles that are ready to eat. It can't be raw, okay, but it has to be food which is edible. You can't fulfill your obligation by giving tablecloths or jewelry or books or svarim. You have to actually give 2 edibles or food and drink. It's called 2 edibles, and it has to be a substantial size, like an apple and a pear or a Muhammad. It should be something substantial. Now, the din of Mishloach Manos has to be done during the day of Purim, which means, and I mentioned this every year, and people should be careful about it. Many places, they have what's called Purim shuttle. Like schools do this. You give money, $5, $10 to the school, and you per name, and they send out Shalach Manos for you to this and this person. And based how many people are sending to that person, that's depending on the size of the Mishleach Monis. Okay, that's a wonderful thing. It's a good charity for the school, but it's very probable, I'm not going to say definitively because it's possible it would work, depending on certain situations, but it's most probable that you do not fulfill your obligation in Mishleach Monis with those Purim shuttles. Number one, a lot of them are delivered Erev Purim, the day before Purim, or Purim night. Okay, so that's automatically you didn't fulfill your obligation. Even if you get it Purim day, but if like you get 5 things and 10 things in the Mishleach Monis, and 30 people are sending it to you, so you don't have a substantial amount of 2 things per person sending it to you. So if you're sending Shalach Monis through a shuttle, you might not be giving 2 decent foods to one person even. So therefore, it's definitely suggested in halacha that even if you do the Purim shuttle, which is fantastic, it's good charitable donation to the schools, but nevertheless, you should still give at least 1 Mishleach Monis to one person. Mishleach Monis, you have to give men to men, women to women. Okay? Even now, also when families give to families today, you come, you give family to family. That's nice, but it's still preferable that at least 1 Mishleach Monis, a man should give to a man, and a woman should give to a woman, not families to families, because then the question is who's giving it, who's getting it. So every person should make sure to do 1 decent Mishleach Monis, man to man, woman to woman. Kids should also be trained. Rebbe mentioned that many times. Kids should be trained in also giving the mitzvah of Mishleach Monis to fulfill their obligation. Now, even though, by the way, halachically, a man has to give a man or a woman to a woman, but because it's a question of kedushin, whatever, without getting into it now, nevertheless, a brother could give a sister can give a brother, a son can give a mother can give a son. The wife can give to the husband. I guess it might be questionable, but those relationships where there's definitely no marriage involved, so then you could give technically a Mishleach Monis, a man to a woman, if it's a sister or a daughter or whatever. But blood relatives there's no question of marriage, but not to a cousin or an aunt or something like that. That should not be given. That's the mitzvah Mishleach Monis. Then there's a mitzvah matanos lavyanim, giving, and the pasuk says matanos lo evyanim. So Mishleach Monis, it says Monis is plural, each man to his friend. So it means 2 edibles to 1 man or 1 woman. By matanos lo evyanim, the Torah says matanos plural, lo evyanim to poor people plural. So from there, the Gemara learns out what the Megillah means is 1 charitable donation to 1 person and a charitable donation to another person. So you have to give 2 people. Now, what's the minimum? Whatever. The bottom line is you should give it. The Rambam says, Shulchan Aruch says that Hashem is happier when you give more matanos le'evyanim than Mishleach Monis, because there's nothing making Hashem happier when people support poor people. So that it's very important to give matanos lavyanim. Now, ideally, you should give matanos lavyanim on the day of Purim, and if preferable, if possible, it should be given out to poor people on the day of Purim. If not, you designate the money on Purim, designate it on the day of Purim, and then when the chance comes up, you can give it to a poor person. But ideally, if you can give it to an organization that gives out that day, in many shuls, by the way, I know when the money that comes into Arsha Matanos Lavyanim, I give it to the organization that gives it out that day of Purim. And that's the preferred way of doing it, to give it to the poor people on the day of Purim itself. But again, the more you give, the merrier, and it's better again. You have to do that. Now, over there, by Matanos Lavyanim, the din is a man can give a woman and a woman can give a man. It's just by Mishleach Monis, you can't give the food a man to a woman to a man. Okay, Matanos Avienim, that we decided. Okay, now one thing remaining to discuss in halacha is Sudas Purim. Now, normally there's a mitzvah on Purim. One of the rabbinic mitzvahs of Purim is to have a meal. According to many opinions, you need to have bread, challah bread. You don't need lechem mishnah, but you need to wash for hametzi. According to many opinions, you also must have meat. According to opinion, it could be yaitze through chicken. Some people say, no, you really should have meat. In Chabad, there's a custom of eating kreplach. Kreplach is meat surrounded in a dough. That's baked or fried, depending how you make it. And that's, the Rebbe writes, that's our minig. I mentioned there's a story that they say, it's not a printed story, but they say that the Rebbe was once home, I don't know which that was, Yom Kippur, probably Purim, and there wasn't kreplach. Whatever reason, the Rebbe didn't make kreplach. So what the Rebbe did was, now normally a husband would scream at the wife for not making kreplach. But what the Rebbe did was, he took a piece of challah, made a dent in the challah. He took a piece of chicken or meat, whatever it was, and he put it inside the challah. So now he had meat covered with dough, and he had kreplach. But there is a concept of eating kreplach, there's a concept of eating meat, and also washing for bread. You don't need lechem mishnah, because it's not Shabbos or Yom Tov. But normally, what's done is in a regular year, you daven mincha earlier in the afternoon, and people go home and have a suda, and they start by day. Ideally, the majority of the meal should be by day. Some poskim say no, as long as you start by day, and it extends into the night, and then afterwards you go to shul to daven ma'ariv. This year is a problem because Purim is on Friday. Now there is a din in Shulchan Aruch about Fridays. That Friday afternoon you should not eat a big meal, because it's a mitzvah to have a meal Friday night. And if you eat a lot of food Friday afternoon, you're not going to have an appetite to eat the meal Friday night. So therefore, even for instance, a bris milah, that's on Friday, in Shulchan Aruch, the Rebbe brings it down also in Hilchos Shabbos, the suda should be in the morning. So halachically, the Purim suda ideally should be before midday, which is about 1 o'clock nowadays if they changed the clock. So before the suda should be in the morning, have wash and have meat and whatever it is. Doesn't have to be 8 o'clock in the morning for breakfast, but you can have a fleishik meal. Some people have fish, people have soup, people have kreplach, whatever it is. Ideally, the meal should be eaten before 1 o'clock. If not, as long as the meal begins before the 10th hour, it's also good. In LA, the 10th hour is 4:31. That means if you didn't eat the meal in the morning, you can, as long as you started this Purim before 4:31, you're okay. But again, that's b'diavad. The proper way is eating the meal in the morning, or at least early afternoon, not late afternoon. There's a concept people are doing Perdas Mapa. That should not be, that means you continue the meal into the night, you cover the halachos, then you make kiddush without Pergafen, hametzi, whatever. But that should not be done in a private situation or a shul of from people. It should not be done. The Rebbe writes that we don't do it anymore. They used to do it, the Rebbe stopped it because people didn't know what they're doing. And even Shulchan Aruch, the Rebbe says, a Baal Nefesh should not do it. And according to Kabbalah, you shouldn't do it. So there's a lot of issues with Peres Mata. Many people, Chabad houses, are doing it because people won't come Friday early because people are working. So they're going to make like a Megillah reading 6 o'clock in the evening, and then they go into the meal, and it goes into Shabbos. So then they would, because of that situation, that otherwise people would not hear the Megillah, they could do Peres Mata. But otherwise, a from shul, according to our custom, what the Rebbe writes clearly is we don't do it anymore. You should not do Peres Mapa. You should do the Sud ideally in the morning, and if not in the morning, at least early afternoon. At least, again, LA time is before 4:31. Okay, so that's the mitzvah of Sudas Purim. Sudas Purim there's also a mitzvah, by the way. And here's another interesting shaila. The Gemara says, "Chayiv inish b'psuma b'puria ad lo yada bein adar hamen lebarach martcha." It says in the Gemara, a person is obligated. I'm just going to say simply what the Gemara means and then explain it according to Chassidus also. The Gemara says the person is obligated to get drunk with wine, b'psuma b'puria, and Rashi says b'yayin. The Rambam says it means with wine. Ad lo yada, you get so drunk you don't know the difference between ordered Haman, that Haman is cursed, and Mordechai is blessed. But other poskim, Shchonach and the Rebbe was adamantly against it about getting drunk. Okay, the Rebbe did not want people to get drunk in Purim. Shchonach says people should not get drunk in Purim, but says in Shulchan Aruch what people should do. If you drink more than you normally drink, you get tired, you go to sleep. So when you sleep, you also don't know the difference between ordered Haman and Baruch Mordechai. Which, by the way, an interesting point, ordered Haman is the same numerical value as Baruch Mordechai. So it says you get so drunk that you don't know the difference. But the Rebbe explained what it means in Ruchnius. Wine represents the secrets of Torah. Yeno shel Torah. Nichnas yayin yotza sod. The Gemara says it simply means when you get drunk, all your secrets come out. But yayin, wine, represents the hidden parts of Torah that you get that's hidden in the grape. So that refers to the secrets of Torah. Shaman, oil, that refers to Chassidus, which is even a higher level. But Yeno Shel Torah means a person should be so drunk in Chassidus, in learning, that they're totally, so to speak, out of control in the Kedusha of learning, that they don't know the difference between Order Haman and Baruch Mordechai. Okay, so that is ideally the dinim of Purim. Again, don't forget, this year Purim, you're going straight into Shabbos. By the way, at the meal, there's supposed to be Divrei Torah. People should drink a little bit more than otherwise. But don't forget that we're going straight from Friday into Shabbos. You have to remember the Ben Shlichten time. And, just don't forget with the busyness of Purim, don't forget that you have to Ben Shlichten going into Shabbos. And that's biblical already. It's interesting, this year, it's not relevant to people in America, but this year is called Purim HaMeshulash. Now, Yerushalayim, I'm using Yerushalayim as an example because that's practical city. Any walled city from the time of Yeshua ben Nun doesn't celebrate Purim the way we do. They celebrate Shushan Purim. Okay. We celebrate Purim on the 14th of the month of Adar. In Yerushalayim, at a regular Yom Tif, at the regular year, they celebrate Purim on the 15th. That means on the 14th, no Shalach Monis, no Megillah reading, no Matanis Lavyanim, no Alanisim. They do everything a day later. So when we're finished with Purim, they're reading the Megillah and they do all the mitzvahs on the next day. That's a normal year Purim. This year, because Shushan Purim, when they would celebrate Purim, it's Shabbos. So there's different stories. They're not allowed to read the Megillah on Shabbos. The Gemara says you don't read the Megillah on Shabbos because you might come to carry it. Like we don't blow shofar on Shabbos or Rosh Hashanah, even though biblically you do. Or Sukkot, we don't take lulav and esrog when it's Shabbos, even though biblically you do. The Chachamim said you don't because you might come to carry it. And in fact, on Shabbos Purim, like in Yerushalayim, the Megillah is muktzah. You're not allowed to even touch it. So what do? It's very interesting what they do in Yerushalayim. It's called 3-day Purim. Purim HaMeshulash. What they do is like this. They read the Megillah like all of us. Thursday night and Friday, they're going to read the Megillah. Because they can't do it in Shabbos. So they do it Thursday and Friday like us. Matanis Lavyanim, they give on Friday. Ala Nisim, they don't say on Friday, most of them. They say it on Shabbos. And Sudas Purim and Mishleach Mones, they do on Sunday. So in Yerushalayim, they're celebrating 3 days. Friday, they read the Megillah like us and do Matanis Lavyanim. Shabbos, they just say Ala Nisim because that's their Purim. Sunday, they do Sudas Purim and Mishleach Manos. Okay, but that's just an interesting concept. Therefore, it's called Purim and Mishulash. And again, because Purim is on Friday, so is Erev Pesach. Like this year, Erev Pesach is Shabbos. Okay, that's basically the practical dinim that we need to know about Purim. Now let's talk about some Chassidic insights to Purim instead of Tanya. Purim is, yes, you say Haydu and Pasach on Friday before Mincha. Yes. Okay, Purim, there's a lot of aspects that we can talk about Purim. There's a few general concepts that really encompass the whole aspect of Purim. We know Purim, there's no mention of Hashem's name in the Megillah. You look in the Megillah, there is no one time mention Hashem's name. There's a lot of things which are allude to Hashem's name. When it says Hamelech, it refers to Hashem. The Gemara says when it says Achashverosh, it refers to Hashem. Misha Achris Veresh Shalei, the one whose beginning and end belongs to him. There's the acronyms Yahweh Hamelech V'Amanayim, it's Yud Kei Vav Kei. There's a lot of alluding to Hashem's name in the Megillah. But there is no mention of Hashem's name in the Megillah. Why not? The halachic reason for that is because the Persians, the story of Purim happened in Persia. They were going to make the Megillah into a historical event. And then the people would use the name of Hashem for their idols. So therefore, when the Anshe Knesset Agdela Esther wrote the Megillah, they left out Hashem's name, that it shouldn't be defamed, using it for their idols. Which means, by the way, that it's a lower level than a regular Sefer in Tanakh that has many times Hashem's name. Comes along Chassidus, and Chassidus says, no, it's just the opposite. The reason why there's no mention of Hashem in the Megillah is not because it's lower, but on the contrary, because it's higher. What does it mean it's higher? A name is not the essence of the person. The name is the way a person is able to be identified with somebody else. In other words, somebody wants to talk about you. Somebody wants to call you. How do they get your attention? They can say, hey, you. So they say a name. You yourself, if you would be the only one in the world, you wouldn't need a name. If you're living by yourself in a jungle somewhere, you don't need a name. A name represents the way the person is identified with somebody else or something else. When we have Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud Kei Vav Kei means Mahave, creator. Not only that, Yud Kei Vav Kei, we learned, represents all 10 attributes. Yud is Chachma, Hey is Bina, Vav is the 6 fetus, and Hey is Malchus. And Das is in there somewhere. So Yud Kei Vav Kei represents the way Hashem comes into the world. Any name of Hashem, the 7 names, represents the way Hashem is connected and dealing with worldly issues. Purim is a miracle that supersedes even those levels of godliness of Yud Kei Vav Kei. It supersedes it. It's above it. What do you mean it's above it? The same thing the Rebbe explained, by the way, by Maida Ani. Maida Ani, we say right away, we get up in the morning, we don't even wash our hands, and we say Moda Ani. Why do we say Maida Ani lefanecha? How can we say it before washing our hands? So in halacha it says the reason is because there's no mention of Hashem's name. If there's no mention of Hashem's name, it's nothing holy, so you could say it. The Rebbe comes along in Kuntis and Yonish Chassidus, and the Rebbe explains according to Chassidus, on the contrary, Moida Ani represents the essence of the Jew, not the name of the Jew, the essence of Hashem, and the name of, and the essence of the Jew. So because it's the essence of the Jew and the essence of Hashem, there is no impurity there. Names, meaning the way you intellect, emotions, thought, speech, and action, those can become impure. The essence of the Jew, the Moida Ani, the submission of the Jew to Hashem, can never become Tamei. So again, it's the same thing. In halacha, it's because it's lower than Hashem's name. There is no mention of Hashem's name, so you could say it. Or according to Chassidus, it's just the opposite. It refers to the essence of the Jew, connecting to the essence of Hashem, and there's no impurity. The same thing is in the Megillah. Now, why is it in the Megillah like this? And therefore, there's no name of Hashem, because the whole story of the Megillah is higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now, where do we see this? We know there's nature and there's miracles. Now, nature really, Chassidus explains, is a miracle. Sun comes up in the east, sets in the west. The birth of a baby. You plant a seed, out comes a tree. I mean, the whole human body, this is super miracles. Why do we call it nature? Because it's continuous, it's constant. In other words, a constant miracle is called nature. Why? Because if it's constant, we don't see any greatness to it. And that's why nature, teva, in Hebrew means, teva means tubu'u b'yamsuf, sunken in the sea. Teva means godliness is so sunken, you don't see it. When a miracle happens, oh, everybody says the hand of God. Normally, water flows. Hashem split the sea. Oh, it was a big miracle. What's the miracle? That something changed in nature. The name Elokim is numerically Hateva, the nature. Elokim refers to that level of God that's in nature, running the world. Bereshit bara Elokim, Vayomer Elokim, Vayomer Elokim. Creation was with the name of Elokim, which represents the concealed level of godliness. Teva. Yud Kei Vav Kei, which if you look at the word, you have Haya, Hoveh, and Yihi, and the same word, represents past, present, and future simultaneously. That represents the supernatural. So Yud Kei Vav Kei is the supernatural, Elokim is the natural. What happened by Purim is a very interesting thing that happened. If you look at the story of Purim, read it like a Bible critic. It wasn't such a big miracle, the whole story of Purim. Just read the story. The king had a wife, Vashti. He got angry or he killed her. Okay. He picked a new wife, Esther, happened to be Jewish. Okay. Then this guy Haman comes on the scene, makes problems. Then Esther comes to the king. She comes to her, and Mordechai says to her, hey, you could do something for us. And Mordechai was a big machar in the government. Okay? So Esther's the queen. So she comes to her husband and says, listen, darling, this guy wants to kill me. Do something. So the king says, oh, what? No, I'm going to kill him. So Haman's killed. Okay? That's a very natural phenomenon. I mean, it's not something supernatural. So Chassidus explained what was but it was the ultimate miracle. The decree came for no reason, naturally. The decree against the Jews came, the Gemara says, why did the Jews deserve to be annihilated? You know what it means to wipe out every single Jew, man, woman, and child in the whole world, 127 countries? What did the Jews do to merit that terrible thing? And the Gemara says, Nana Achashverosh made a party. Why did he make a party? The Gemara says, because Achashverosh miscalculated the 70 years that were supposed to be between the first temple and the second temple. The prophets told him there's going to be 70-year exile. Achashverosh miscalculated the years. He thought the 70 years are up. Okay? And he said, nothing's happening. That means the Jews are not going back. No more temples. So the king threw a big party. At the party was not only glatt kosher food. You wanted Chabad shchita, you had Chabad shchita. You wanted satmer, you wanted litfish, whatever you wanted. Last each for each, the Gemara says, he made everybody happy. Haman happy, he thought he did. Mordechai happy. Everything was unbelievably great. But the Gemara says, why did the Jews deserve to be wiped out? Because Nana Mesudasa Shoy Serosha. The Jews enjoyed the Goyish meal of Achashverosh. The Gemara doesn't say they ate trade. They didn't eat trade. It was 100% kosher. What did they do wrong? Achashverosh is making a party to celebrate the not rebuilding of the temple, and the Jews ran to the party for free food. That's all they did. What's so terrible? Free food. And the Gemara said because they did it, they deserve to be wiped out. And then Mordechai comes to Esther, and Esther says to the king, okay, I'm going to fast for 72 hours, and then I'm going to go to the king. I have to find favor in his eyes. Everybody knows the story of Purim, yeah? Can you imagine a woman fasting 72 hours, what she looks like? And then she's going to go to the king to find favor? Esther knew this is not something happening in a natural way. This is supernatural. And the whole story of the Megillah. So Chassidus explains what was the uniqueness of Purim over all other miracles. It was a miracle in nature. Splitting the sea, water flows. You want to stop it? Hashem stopped the water. That changes nature. It wasn't in nature. It was breaking nature. The nature of water is to flow. Hashem stopped it. That's a miracle. A miracle means you change nature. But that nature should be a miracle, that's something unique. Why is it unique? Because miracle and nature are two opposites. If you want to tap in to combine two opposites, you need to be above both. Because if you're limited in nature, you can't do a miracle. If you're limited in miracle, you can't do nature. Like, again, we learned in Chassidus. If somebody asks you, is God spiritual or physical? A person will answer normally. A person that doesn't learn Chassidus will answer you, of course, God's spiritual, not physical. But that's incorrect. Number one, if you're saying God is spiritual, then you're limiting him that he's not physical. That's a limitation that you cannot limit God. If somebody says God is only infinite, that itself is a limitation that he's not finite, that he's not limited. And obviously that's not true. And if God is only infinite, how does he create finite? So what's the answer? Whether we understand it or not doesn't change the reality. Hashem is not infinite, he's not finite. Hashem is not miracle, he's not nature. He's not light, he's not dark. Hashem is above it all. And because he's above light and dark, he can combine light and dark. Because he's above nature, because he's above nature and miracle, he can make miracle and nature go together. He can make finite and infinite coexist because he's above both. What happened in Purim? Purim was a miracle of nature, miracle in nature, meaning it came from a source higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is miracle. But this is not a regular miracle. This is a combination of Hashem and Elokim together, supernatural and natural, which had to tap into a level which is above both. That explains why the Yom Tov is called Purim. Why is it called Purim? The Megillah says, Al Kain Karel Yom HaMeila Purim Al Shem HaPurim. Haman cast lots to know which day is good to destroy the Jews. It fell out in the month of Adar. He said, great. Moshe died that day, that month. It's great. He didn't know Moshe Rabbeinu was born that month, but whatever. He cast lots. What is a lottery? And by the way, it's interesting. The word Purim is a Persian word in the Megillah. People pur who are gairol. Lottery in Hebrew, in Torah, is gairol. All over Chumash, you have gairol yecholei kodesh. The Hebrew word for lottery is gorol. Here, the Yom Tov is called Purim. Why? Because of the Persian word for lottery. What does that mean? Lottery is something completely illogical. Unbelievable. It's unbelievably illogical. That's what Purim is all about. Above logic, above logic and above not logic. It's above nature and above miracle. It's above everything. That's why we find another interesting thing, and everything fits in now. On Yom Tif, there was a din, biblical din, of a samachta b'chagecha. It's a biblical mitzvah on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot to be besimcha. It's a biblical mitzvah. Yet the Gemara says, Bais Din sent out messengers to make sure people were not carrying on, not getting drunk, that the simcha was tamed. Bais Din sent out shluchim on Yom Tif to make sure people didn't get drunk and do whatever they did. Even though it's a biblical mitzvah. Here we have a rabbinic mitzvah, Purim, and the mitzvah is to get so drunk, like we said before, it's simply the lo yada, you don't even know. That means Simchas Purim is greater than the Simcha of a biblical Simcha of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, where the Torah says clearly, the Samachta b'chagecha. What's the answer? Because Purim taps into a level of lo yada, above seichel, above logic, above the level of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Therefore, there's no mention of Hashem's name, because it is higher than Hashem's name. Another thing, and this explains another thing also. It says, "Balayla hu noded shnas hamelech." The beginning of the 6th chapter of the Megillah. Again, I'm not going through the whole story, but Haman made the decree, and he wanted to come and they made a gallows 50 amas high, and he wanted to kill Mordechai with hang Mordechai and the whole story. So the pasuk says that night the king couldn't sleep. Achashverosh's sleep was disturbed. We know that the word Hamelech, and we mentioned this before, that when it says the word the king in the Megillah, it means Hashem. Now it says, Balaylo noded shnas hamelech, the king's sleep, Hashem's sleep was disturbed. The question is, there's a pasuk in Tehillim that we say every Shabbos and davening, and if you say a prayer for Israel, Kuf Chaf Aleph in Tehillim, there's a pasuk that says, Hine lo yonum v'lo yishan shem Yisrael. God neither sleeps nor slumbers. If God doesn't sleep, how do you have noded shnas hamelech? How do you have that the king Hashem's sleep was disturbed? So Chassidus explains that what is the concept of sleep? Sleep is you don't know what's going on. You can dream crazy things. If a person thinks about it during the day, Gemara says you can't even dream about it, but the Rebbe writes, if you think about during the day, you could dream about an elephant going through the eye of a needle. It's so far-fetched. You can't even dream it unless you thought about it. But if you thought about it during the day, you can even think about it at night in dreams. What is it, sleep? What is a dream? Things don't function properly. That represents sleep, but that represents Golus. Golus, instead of the Jews being on top of the world, instead of godliness being revealed, it's topsy-turvy. The Goyim, evil, corruption, that's what's running the world. It's not normal. What happens when Geula comes? Geula comes, so Kaviyachal, that's when Hashem is sleeping. When the world is functioning in a crazy way, so this explains, that's the concept of sleep. When things don't function, doesn't mean Hashem's sleeping. It means the world is not functioning normally. Like a person thinks stupid things in a dream. That night, the king started waking up. What do you mean spiritually waking up? The Geula, and that happens. He told Mordechai, Haman took Mordechai, and everything changed around. What caused that to happen? The Gemara says, Chassidus has a field day with this concept. The decree of Achashverosh was in the month of Nisan. The Megillah says he cast lots in Nisan. And that the next order, 12 months later, meaning a whole year later, is going to destroy the Jews. So the Gemara says, the Medrash says, that Kol Hashana Kula, that whole year, the Jews stood with Mesiras Nefesh in a way that Le'ola Machshavas Chutz Chas v'Sholom. They didn't even have one foreign thought to give in to Achashverosh and to give in to Haman. Now, what does it mean a whole year? So Chassidus explains there's 4 seasons. There's summer, winter, spring, and fall. In Chassidus, it explains summer has its Avaida, winter has its Avaida, spring has its Avaida, and fall has its Avaida. There's Nisan to Tishrei, Tishrei to Nisan, and then in between you have the other Tkufas. Every season has its own unique Avodas Hashem, serving Hashem. What happened? A whole year they stood with Mesiras Nefesh. Means that for any type of avodah, that they had to serve Hashem, not even a foreign thought entered their mind. That was Mesiras Nefesh. That Mesiras Nefesh caused the miracle that Hashem woke up. Why? And the miracle of Nes in Teva, tapping into a level higher than Yudke Vavke and Elokim. What is Mesiras Nefesh? Mesiras Nefesh, there is no reason, the Rebbe says in Maimorim, there's no reason in Chumash why you have to be Mesiras Nefesh. It doesn't make sense, because normally the Torah says, V'chaibam, you're supposed to be alive. You know, you have to desecrate Torah to save a life. Yet there's a mitzvah of Mesiras Nefesh. Where does it come from? Not from a logical place. There's no reason logical for Mesiras Nefesh. Where does it come from? It comes from higher than Seichel. But the whole story of Purim. The Jews, when they had Mesiras Nefesh through every possible scenario of Avodah, and they didn't even have a foreign thought to do something wrong. So what happened was that woke up the Golos that ran from the Jews running to enjoy a meal of this Goyish King Achashverosh who was celebrating the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and they're not rebuilding. So this Mesiras Nefesh of the Jews woke up Hashem, so to speak. The things started running now normally. The Jews are on top and good Kedushas are on top and evil's at the bottom. And what happened? Achashverosh takes Haman's house as Bais Haman Nasati Lester. Achashverosh takes Haman's house, which represents super level of evil, and made a Kedusha of Mordechai and Esther. So that's the story of Purim. Anyway, somebody asked a question 1 second about something about Machzis Shekel. I told you, put in $1.50 and you take out $3.50 and that's it. And you put it back in. Anyway, everybody have a Freilich Purim. Don't get too drunk. A Freilich Purim, good Shabbos. We should only hear good news. Mitzvah Monday night will be a Parsha Shir. And next Wednesday, we are starting Hilchos Pesach at the Wednesday night Shir. Until then, everybody have a great Yom Tov and a great Shabbos and everything good.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Purim Sameach.